Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the August webinar series coming to you live from the Center for Translation and Implementation Research from the University of Nigeria. And this month, we have a very special speaker in our midst, and I will be introducing her very shortly. I'll be introducing her very shortly to every one of us. So I have with me, and we have with us, Dr. Stephanie Bemere, who's an assistant professor in the Duke University of Nursing at Duke University. And she's also an affiliate faculty in the Duke Global Health Institute. And she also happens to be the associate director for the Nursing Center for Evidence-Based Practice at the Ivan Research Institute here in Nigeria. She is focused on improving the clinical model of care for sickle cell disease in low resource settings, both in sub-Saharan Africa and in the US, using tool adaptation, implementation science, and leveraging technology and community engaged research. She's also very passionate about addressing healthcare disparities in partnerships with communities to co-create feasible and sustainable healthcare interventions for and with patients, providers, and healthcare systems. So without much ado, I'm going to be welcoming Dr. Stephanie. And hi, Dr. Stephanie, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning. I hope everybody can hear me. Yes, okay. Let me share my screen just quickly here. So one thing I want everybody to know is that I'll be asking for audience participation. So please be ready to be typing in the chat. I want to hear from you all as we go through this presentation. Though it's a webinar, it's very important to me that you also are part of it. So I want to hear from you in the chat. So be ready to type. As Professor Nyaka said, I am Stephanie Bemere. I am from the School of Nursing at Duke University, but I'm very honored to be here today also as an associate director for our Nursing Center for Evidence-Based Practice at the Ivan Research Institute. And today I was asked to provide a presentation to you all about the anatomy of a grant. And I do hope that we can have, I do hope that this can be a helpful presentation to you all. I want to also share that it's not possible for me to cover every single type of grant that exists out there, but I do hope that at least this can give you a bit of information about what a grant should look like, what it should contain, and how we can get there. So without saying much more, today the overview of the presentation is here on your screen. First, we'll start by asking you, what is a grant? I want to hear from you all. Then we'll talk about the preparation a bit, but really the preparation will come in on overview 2.1, where we talk about the 5 R's of grant writing. And then I will go briefly into some of the grant components that are often looked for in a grant proposal. And then I'll share a couple of resources with you all and some tips. And then we'll open it up for questions, and I'll do my best to answer those. So our first audience interaction. You all saw this flyer going around. I even received messages from some of you that you've seen my face in your WhatsApp groups. And so you registered for this event with some thoughts in your mind already about what it is you might be coming here to learn. And so the question I have for you then is, I want to hear from you. What is it that you think is a grant? What is a grant to you? And what is it for? So please, I want to see the chat filling up with your thoughts on what is a grant. I see here that a grant is a support towards a certain project. I like that. That's a good way to explain it. Anybody else have some feedback for me? What is a grant? I want to hear from you all. I'm not that kind of teacher. I want to hear from you. One other person has said a grant is a support towards a given cause or a project. I like this. Are we sure you guys shouldn't be doing the lecture yourselves? It sounds like you guys know some things here. Financial assistance given to a researcher to enable them to conduct a research. That's a good one. Thank you. A grant is a financial resource for research. I like it. Any other thoughts before I move on? A grant is a formal proposal for financial support. A grant is a funding towards a project. I like it. Grant is an aid or support given to for the execution of a project. I like that English. Very nice. Financial award given to a researcher for a project. These are all wonderful, wonderful thoughts, and they're all correct. A grant or a grant proposal is an opportunity for a person, whether that's a researcher, an educator, a clinician, to put their ideas forward to someone who has funds available to support the work that they are proposing. And so all of these options, all of these suggestions given in the chat are all correct definitions of what a grant is. Now, just because we know what a grant is does not mean that we're necessarily ready to submit or write a grant, okay? It takes what? Preparation, right? And so a grant, the full definition that I was able to find from different resources says that a grant is an example of a persuasive, convincing writing exercise that's used to support an idea for which you wish to receive funding from an organization, an agency, or a funder. So when we're discussing, I will be talking from the perspective of research. And so the goal of a grant proposal is to secure funding to ensure that you can conduct your research and conduct it well. So in other words, what you write in this grant proposal are your hopes that a funder will grant you, so they will give you money to achieve what you have proposed to do in your grant proposal, okay? So you have to prepare, though, to be able to do this. To be successful, it takes a great deal of preparation. So in this preparatory period, it really depends on a lot of different things, and that's how you work, the funder's deadlines, your institutional deadlines, what your idea is. All those things are part of that preparation period. So you might be asking yourself right now, what are some of the things that one should do to prepare? Well, I invite you again to use the chat box, please, and share some things that you can think of that might be important to include in your preparatory period. What do you think it takes to prepare to write a grant? So I would love to hear from you in the chat. And as you are filling up the chat with what you think those preparation techniques or ideas should be, I'm going to go on to introduce a framework that might be helpful to you. So please fill up the chat, because this is an interactive learning webinar. That's how I want it to be. I want you guys to share with each other and with me so that we can all learn together. Any thoughts about what your preparation might be? Somebody said first to read the introduction. If you don't start at the beginning, or the instructions, if you don't start at the beginning, how can you know what you're supposed to do? I see here, a grant is a way the government funds your ideas and projects to provide public services and stimulate the economy. That's a good one. And one person says you're supposed to look at the aim of the research, look at the grant requirements. Instruction is key. I agree that instruction is paramount. Look at the budget, the problem statement, the way forward, literature review. All of these are great. So there's a number of resources that you can use, right, to help you prepare for grant writing. Tons of resources. All you have to do is really do a very quick Google search, and you will find lots of information about how does one prepare themselves to do research. But I think that the 5 R's of grant writing are really, really helpful as a helpful framework or toolbox that you can use to prepare yourself for writing. I call it a strategy for grant writing, okay? And so I'll take you through each one of the steps to familiarize you with the concepts here. I want to also highlight, somebody has said that you're supposed to, in preparing to write a grant, ask yourself if you're suitable for the grant. I like that. So the first R of research is actually goes right off of what that person said. Ask yourself if you're suitable for it. The first step of grant writing requires that you spend some time doing intensive research about your landscape. You have to understand the grant landscape and identify the right opportunities that fit your idea. So in order to do that, you have to do some preliminary research, such as understanding what types of funding agencies exist, understand if there's even funding in the area for your field, understand who has that funding. And some of those are listed here. Some of them may or may not be applicable to you. However, I hope this gives you an overview of what you can expect in terms of the types of funding agencies that exist. So, for example, you have institutional funding that might be a good way to start your research ideas out. I can use myself as an example. I used institutional funding to fund a pilot study, which will be the basis of a larger grant that I will submit later this year. Sometimes it may be that your idea has grown to the point of larger funding needs, and so you might submit to a foundation or a government through things like the International Foundation, or in the case of many researchers, many people submit to National Institutes of Health or USAID, because those funds are larger and they cover a broader swath of a discipline or a field. So it's important for you to do research to understand which kinds of funding agencies exist and what their goals are. So you may also need to understand the type of grant mechanism you should be applying for. You don't want to apply for a research grant when you really are looking for money to buy equipment, or you're proposing an educational intervention that doesn't have a research component. You don't want to put yourself at a disadvantage by picking the wrong grant mechanism. So it's important for you to understand that there are grants for different ideas. And it's our job as the investigator to determine which one we are seeking. Each funding agency will definitely make it clear the types of grants that they have and what is allowable, okay? So, for example, as I mentioned, if you are doing something that is in research or in clinical practice, you're trying to generate knowledge or improve the quality of care your patients are receiving, you want to be going for a research-facing grant. Maybe you're trying to start up a business, and so there are business grants that exist, and so you should be seeking those types of funds. Maybe you are a postdoctoral fellow, or you've just finished your PhD and you know you need some additional training. And so you should be going after grants that that are focused on your postdoctoral fellowship, or you're an early career investigator. You've just become a faculty member, but you would like some protected time to make sure that you can get your research program off the ground. You should be focusing on career development fellowship awards, or career development awards at this time. Like I mentioned, if you are in education and you're trying to develop a curriculum, or you're trying to affect change in an existing curriculum, there are education grants that exist that you should be seeking and going after. And then, of course, as I mentioned, there are infrastructural grants that are specifically for equipment and buildings. And this particular slide is going to become very important as I go through this presentation, especially at the end of the presentation, because of what is allowed and not allowed in certain grants. So, as I mentioned, it's our job as the investigator to assess the funding environment. There are so many opportunities that are available to us, but it's left to us to seek them out and research them and then apply. So you may be asking yourself now, if there's all these opportunities, Dr. Stephanie, how, why am I having such a hard time finding them, or where can I get this information? It happens that you came to the right place. There are a few things you can do right now to get access to grant information. I will share other resources later in the presentation, but some of the easiest things you can do for yourself is to join an email listserv for funding agencies. If you haven't signed up already for CITAIR's newsletter, what are you doing? Come on, sign up today. It's your time. This is it. You're right in the right place. There are tons of different ways you can get this information. You can actually set up a Google alert for yourself that you can have sent to your email at your chosen frequency. When you research a funder, save their webpage by bookmarking the page to a grants folder in your browser. I encourage you to set aside some time every week, if this is something that is of interest to you, to review new grants and funding opportunities, to give yourself the edge or the leg up on what money is available. As you can see here, I've put in some links for the NIH and USAID, but there are other funding agencies that exist out there that you can get information from. And the link that I have included here for the NIH actually subscribes you or allows you to subscribe to their funding announcements. So every single grant has a very specific eligibility criteria, objectives, and processes for submitting the application. This is something that some of you have already put in the chat. That's even to say that down to the font type and the size of the font has been specified for some grant applications. So in your preparation for submitting a grant, make sure that you have done the research, that you have studied the guidelines front to back and back to front to determine if the grant opportunity fits your proposed study aims and goals. So please make note that there are even some funding agencies that have automated systems which will disqualify your application if you do not meet their requirements. So beware, this could be disastrous for your work, and we don't want that. So take the time, review and review again the guidelines that are written out for your specific grant opportunity. It is extremely wise to take a look at what previous grant awardees have done in the past to understand what a successful grant looks like, right? When we say we practice, we're supposed to practice to make perfect. I actually think it's perfect practice that makes perfect. And so if somebody has done this before, wouldn't it be wise to go and take a look at what they have done so that you can also be successful? Looking at a successful grant proposal is like putting a magnifying glass on what the funder thinks is valuable to them. Don't miss an opportunity to learn from others. That's also why I've asked us to use the chat box, because maybe there's something somebody will say that will stick to you, you'll use it, and you'll find that you become successful. Lastly, you have to learn or study the organizations and the funders that you're providing, who are providing these grants. You need to know what their mission is, you want to know what their values are, and you have got to know what their funding priorities are. That's because if you're writing a grant that doesn't align with those three things, you're not using your time wisely. You want to find a funding agency that aligns with what you are proposing to do. So with the knowledge of what their values are, their mission, and their funding priorities are, you can definitely craft a grant proposal which will be responsive to the funding agency's interests, okay? So the second R of the 5 R's is relationships. Developing rapport and building strong relationships with communities of interest, collaborators, and funders can support your success in grant writing and getting funded. So relationship building looks like making early and frequent contact with grant administrators. You might be thinking, is that allowed? Yes, it is actually. Register and attend their grant events, like what you've done today. Participate in their technical webinars. A lot of times, funding agencies will actually have webinars that give you technical advice on their funding opportunities. Again, they're giving you gems and you should be there to collect them. Getting to know your grant administrators can actually help you tremendously to get a better understanding of the institution or the organization's funding priorities. You want to consider building collaborations early on in your career and in your research program. So these collaborations often bring timely advice. So if you're here today and you're seeing people in the chat, make sure you connect with them. They've shared where they're at. You should connect with them and learn more about what it is that they're doing. They can give you advice. They can give you resources. And of course, in the end, it can turn into collaborations on grants. Longevity in your collegial collaboration also supports your grant application. okay? It shows that you have made these connections, that the support you have is long-standing and is likely to be helpful to you as you try to execute the aims of your grant. Engaging with the community of interest that you want to affect a change in should occur as soon as you are formulating your ideas. That can help you guide the development of your idea, your project, or intervention, so that it is actually responsive to the needs of the community and thus more likely to be sustained by the community. Gone are the days when you can create an intervention, dump it into a community, and leave. Those days are gone. And so it is now that we should be engaging early with our community members and actually partnering with them as our collaborators, because in the end, it is their communities that we are trying to affect a change in. They know really, truly what best to do in their community and how to make it sustainable. A lot of grant funders and agencies are looking for sustainability and sustainment these days. And so if you're able to develop an intervention or an idea or a project that can actually be sustained by your community members or your community partners, it's better for you. It's extremely helpful in your grant writing and shows that the community you're working in actually has a commitment to the work that you are proposing. Okay, so here I have provided a few ways in which you can actually achieve the second R of the 5 R's of grant writing. These are only a few examples, and so if you have examples of how you can build relationships, I would love for you to drop that in the chat as well. But here are just a few. Like I mentioned, the technical workshops, technical webinars that you can attend from different grant makers. They often publish those right underneath the grant announcement. When you have collaborations with people, you can compare your experiences, share your resources, and establish new relationships. Community engagement might mean hosting a town hall to hear from people in the community to understand what their needs are, whether they're health or education or otherwise. You might be able to conduct community assessments or learn from a community assessment community members have already done to help you guide your intervention development or your project development. So the third R here is relevance, right? Ensure your grant relates to the grant funder's objectives. So you want to make sure that it actually relates to the grant announcement. So this involves aligning your project with the grant maker's mission and goals, as I mentioned. Make a clear connection between how your objectives address their funding priorities. You want to describe the problem or the need your project addresses. Use data and evidence to demonstrate the significance of the issue, and then outline your approach and how it effectively addresses the problem. I'm going to talk a lot more about this in a couple more slides, so I'm going to go ahead and move on from this, but definitely you want to make sure that your project aligns with the grant funder's priorities. So the fourth R of the 5 R's is resources. Your proposal must demonstrate that you have what it takes, the capacity and the resources to actually successfully execute this project. So consider the following aspects when you're thinking about resources. Regardless of the funding agency, you will have to provide a detailed budget, which describes how your funds are going to be distributed and used, okay? You should only budget what you need. So in other words, you need to be realistic and make sure your budget matches with your study aims. You can't propose to implement a new Parkinson's disease identification system and then budget for an entirely different disease intervention. That won't work. Your grant application should also show that your institution itself has what it takes to support your research ideas. So tell the funder about all the human and infrastructural support available to you to execute your project, and also information about how these services have been used by others in the past. So you might want to also mention any partnerships that can add value to your project. So this is where those collaborations become very important and actually enhance your proposal's credibility. You should be able to answer the following questions. Do you even have collaborations? Who are they with? Do these collaborations add to your project? Do you have letters of support for these collaborations? Do the collaborations themselves make sense? So if you're funded, the fifth R of the 5 Rs is that you're going to have to report about your project. So they will ask you for regular information to let them know about your progress in your grant funding. This is how you buy trust from your grant funder. So as part of your reporting to the funder, you'll want to include your detailed progress and share how you are measuring the success of your research with the funder. You would have identified some of these indicators and outcomes of success in your grant proposal, and these can be used to write your report. And some funding agencies actually have specific reporting timelines and specific reporting templates that you should be using, and that they would expect to receive from you as an awardee. Sometimes you need to set up a schedule with your funder, or they may have one set out for you. Whichever is the case, be sure you are regularly communicating with your funder on your progress. And in some cases, for certain grants, you may be assigned what is called a program officer or a scientific officer who actually attends some of your meetings so that they can get regular updates about your progress. The other thing that is so important is that the dissemination of your study results must go out to your funder, but then also to your community of interest. This is how you gain trust from your funder and your community. Okay, so we've done the 5 Rs, right? We've reviewed the 5 Rs. If you guys remember the 5 Rs, go ahead and drop them in the chat box. I want to see who was listening and who has gained something so far. You should be feeling a little bit more prepared now to write your grant, I hope, as a result of the 5 Rs. I know I went through them fast. However, you'll be able to review this later on. So now I'm going to go through some of the common grant elements that you may encounter, no matter what type of funding or grant you're applying for. I see some people are answering correctly. Relationships, resources, research, reporting. Well done, everybody. So I would like to make it clear, though, that I'm using some terms that might be particular to certain funding agencies. So namely research-oriented funding agencies. You guys are doing a great job in the chat. However, the concepts that are illustrated here on this slide and their definitions can be found in the research, education, and nonprofit arenas, and perhaps with different names. So here you can see every grant should include a title. Many funders make requests also for some kind of a summary or an abstract, and some may require something called a specific aims page or an objectives document, okay? A research strategy which provides the greatest detail will also be needed, as well as resources available to you to conduct this research study and a budget. You guys are doing a great job on the chat. Congratulations. So I'm using the term specific aims as I frequently engage with research funding agencies, which require the inclusion of a specific aims page as part of a grant proposal. Specific aims are just another way of saying research objectives. This page, yes, one page, summarizes what you propose to do. In some cases, you may have a hypothesis that you're trying to test. Thus, the specific aims would describe how you intend to test that hypothesis. But your job in the specific aims is to tell the reviewer what the problem is, share what we all know about that problem to date, and then explain what is missing from the current knowledge, which is your proposed gap in research or practice. And then your aims will tell the reviewer how you will actually fill that identified gap in research or practice. It is important to remember that your methods are inextricably linked to your aims. So make sure your aims can be easily interpreted by the reviewers. Specific aims are not the same as your long-term goals. Long-term goals will go to a different place in your grant proposal. Okay, so I wanted to give you a diagram of how you develop your specific aims page. And so we're meant to funnel information basically to the reviewer from a broad perspective down to our problem of interest, which we also address with our innovative solution, which should have clear outcomes and a positive impact on our respective disciplines. So you start broad and you narrow and you narrow and you narrow. down to what is the outcome of what you are proposing. So the research strategy, we like to call this the meat, right? These are the obstacles in the soup, if you will, of your grant proposal. So the research strategy that I'm going to describe is going to be heavily research focused because, again, I am a researcher. But the sections I'm highlighting are named based on that. But the general idea and the concepts that I will be talking about should be cross-cutting concepts. So it should be applicable to any discipline on any kind of grant that you're submitting. So let's see, the imperative part, which somebody mentioned in the very beginning, is that you need to review the eligibility criteria and the grant proposal requirements for each and every grant you submit. So despite what I might say on this slide, it might be that I'm calling it significance, but for another grant, it's called background. Just make sure that you're ensuring you know what each grant announcement says, because they are different and they may require different information for your grant proposal. Okay, so in the next slide, I'm going to share with you some of the questions that these different sections might ask of you and how you should, and essentially those questions make up what you should be writing in each of these sections of your grant. These questions come from the National Institutes of Health, but again, the concepts are similar and could be applicable to other opportunities. A pro tip for you guys: if it is not clear, make sense of what you can and then reach out for clarification. What do I mean? If there's a section of your grant proposal that is required and you're not sure what you're supposed to put in that section of the grant, remember I said you're supposed to develop relationship with the grant funder, with the grant administrators. Reach out to that grant administrator and ask them for clarification as to what exactly is expected in that section. They may not be able to tell you directly what you should write for your particular research idea, but they may be able to help you understand what they're expecting to see in that section. So, for the significance section of a research strategy, here are a few questions that you should be thinking of as you write this section. Does the project address an important problem or a critical barrier to progress in the field? Is there a strong scientific premise for the project? If the aims of the project are achieved, how will scientific knowledge, technical capability, and/or clinical practice be improved? How will successful completion of the aims change the concepts, methods, technologies, treatments, services, or preventative interventions that drive this field? Okay, so that's for significance. You're setting the stage, you're trying to share current knowledge, and then you're identifying the gaps that exist in our current understanding. So for the innovation section, this is the section I personally find the most difficult to write. These are the things that reviewers will be asking themselves as they read your grant. Does this application challenge or seek to shift current research or clinical practice paradigms by utilizing novel theoretical concepts, approaches, or methodologies, instrumentation, or interventions? Are the concepts, approaches, or methodologies, instrumentation, or interventions novel to one field of research or novel in a broad sense? Is a refinement, improvement, or new application of theoretical concepts, approaches, methods, instrumentation, or interventions proposed, right? The next thing that you are going to include in your research strategy is a description of your research team. So when examining the research team, the reviewing research team might ask themselves, are these investigators, collaborators, and researchers well suited for this project? Is this an early stage investigator or a new investigator? Do they have the appropriate experience and training to do this? If they're an established investigator, have they developed a demonstrated ongoing record of accomplishments that have advanced their field? If the project is collaborative or includes multiple primary investigators, do the investigators have complementary and integrated expertise, right? Are there leadership approaches, governances, and organizational structure appropriate for the project, right? Are you proposing something that your team has been able to do or has shown the ability to do? Does your institution have what it takes to support what it is you want to do? You have to write all those things in your research strategy. Preliminary studies help the reviewer to understand that you and your team have scientific command of a topic, that you have a clear plan for resolving an identified gap, and this should often be included in this research strategy area of your grant proposal. This is your opportunity to show that you are building a house and you have the bricks available to you to do that. So for the approach section, the questions that your reviewer might be asking themselves, the overall strategy, methodology, and analyses well reasoned and appropriate to accomplish the specific aims of the project? Have the investigators presented strategies to ensure a robust and unbiased approach as appropriate for the work proposed? Are potential problems, alternative strategies, and benchmarks for success presented? Is this project feasible? Have the investigators presented adequate plans to address biological variables and human subjects? How are they going to protect human subjects? How are they going to include minoritized individuals? So as you can see here, what you're being asked to do is explain yourself. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? And who's going to help you do it? These last few columns on my table, anticipated outcomes, are your opportunity to share what you believe will come as a result of your study. What do you think your study is going to achieve? So this is where you can talk more about your short and long-term goals. Limitations, this is your opportunity to address the fact that there will be barriers and you need to identify them and you need to provide a solution to said barriers. And then finally, the impact of your study and your future studies. This is really where your long-term goals go. How will your study move the discipline forward? You have the opportunity to say that in your research strategy. So I want to highlight a couple of things that may or may not apply to your grant application, but in some way, shape, or form, these ideas do apply to all grant applications. There are often important documents that you have to include in your grant proposal that you cannot miss. So for certain grants, you may be asked to submit something called a biosketch. And so biosketches are not the same as your CV. CVs are usually university specific that contain all of your career information. However, a biosketch is really a very highly structured document that is specific to each grant that you submit and the type of grant that you submit. And it enables the reviewer to evaluate the qualifications of the team and yourself as the investigator, specifically for the project you're proposing, and is actually used by many different types of funding agencies. So the biosketch and your team's biosketches actually help back up what you have written about your research team in the research strategy. You may also be asked to provide, usually you're asked to provide a biosketch for each one of your team members. So another important document, you might have been hearing me say resources, infrastructure, capacity, all these words. What am I trying to get at? So you have the opportunity to tell the funder how capable your institution will be in supporting you and your research. So one of the key issues for a reviewer is, do you have the resources necessary to complete the project? That means equipment, space like lab or an office or a desk. That's IT resources, which we have to thank our IT people here today that are helping us do this webinar. Do you have certain scientific cores at your institution that might be helpful to you? Like, for example, we have a statistical institute. We have certain researchers who understand mHealth, so mobile health. Do you have cores like that at your school that can help advance your research project? If you're proposing a vertebrate animal study, do you have animal facilities at your institution that can help you do your research? If you're proposing clinical research, do you have access to patients that is easy to access? Do you have people to support you in doing that? Do you have clinical space? Does your environment support academic success, right? Do you have clinical and translational scientific organizations or agencies? Do you have a collaborative atmosphere? Do you have seminars? Those kinds of things at your institution. You can list all those things on your facilities and resources document. And when you do that, I should add, when you do that, you want to make sure that what you're listing is specific to your grant, okay? So another important document is the budget. It's always money, okay? For a reviewer, they want to understand if you can complete your project within the budget allotted and on time. The time and the budget are generally set for you. So in other words, your funding agency will tell you how much money is available and how much time you have to accomplish your study objectives. You usually cannot request more money than what was allocated, except in special rare occasions where you get special permission. You want to match your aims to the number of years that are available to you for your grant. Be sure that what you're proposing can actually be accomplished in the time frame set by the funding agency. So feasibility of your work is key, and I can raise my hand and say that that is a very hard thing to do. You need to know the funder's rules. I'm going to keep saying it. Sometimes they have very specific rules about what can be put on your budget and what can't. Sometimes it means you can't put travel. Sometimes it means you actually can't even put your own salary on the budget. You need to know what those rules are. I don't want you to fall for that mistake. Review the budget requirements carefully. What types of things are normally included in a budget? So you might include yourself on the budget, your co-investigators on the budget, which when you include them, you put it down as effort, which is the percent of time each investigator commits to the project. And that effort should make sense. Don't propose to change an entire healthcare system and say you're only going to commit 5% of your time to that. I can guarantee you it takes more than 5% of your time, and they know that too. You can also consider including the cost of other personnel, like maybe you need support through a postdoctoral fellow or graduate or undergraduate students. Maybe a clinical research coordinator could be helpful to you. Any staff that you think could help advance your project or who you should include on your budget, okay? You can include consultants because maybe they have specific expertise that could be helpful to you. And then, of course, there's something called fringe benefits. Fringe benefits are often expenses to cover things like health insurance or other social benefits that the institution has to pay for. So remember that these are just examples and that you'll have to review your grant to understand what is allowed on your grant, on your budget. So you've written your budget now, but now they're asking you to justify your budget. Okay, so a budget justification is a narrative explanation of the budget. Remember, I told you in the beginning, you are a salesperson. You're trying to sell your idea. So this is your opportunity to explain each item on your budget and why it is necessary. So reviewers might be asking themselves, why does it cost this much for you to accomplish your objectives? Do you really need that much money to travel? Why do you even need to travel in the first place? This is your opportunity to explain why. The other thing that is really important for reviewers to understand and to feel that your project is feasible is that they need to see the timeline. So using a timeline or a milestones table like the one on the slide can help the reviewer visualize how your project will unfold and increase the clarity of your project timeline. So some other criteria, it's important to understand that given whatever type of research you are doing, it may have some ethical considerations. So there are a number of different things here that are listed that you may need to consider. Protection of human subjects is often included in your grant proposal as another document that you need to describe of how you're going to protect human subjects. There are actually some decision trees available to you online that could help you determine if the work you are doing includes human subjects or not, okay? Peer reviewers will also assess the adequacy of your plans to include participants in your studies who represent every person who might be affected by a disease process or whatever your project is focused on. So essentially, you need to be able to show that your work is generalizable. You can see here that there are additional thoughts and concepts that need to be included, or criteria that may need to be included depending on what your research is focused on, okay? So if you're going to do work on vertebrate animals, you will have to explain how you intend to protect the animals and your plan for what you're going to do with those animals. Same with biohazards. As we're talking to an international audience, sometimes grant funders will ask you to justify why your project has to occur in another country. And that's not easy to do, but you should reach out to those who have been successful in receiving funding for international work to get their perspective on how they were able to justify doing a project outside of the country where the funder is located. And of recent, data sharing has become a very big thing. And so you may need to write out a data sharing and management plan as part of your grant proposal. And there are countless resources available to you to do that. So I'm rounding up here. I wanted to share a couple of tips with you guys about some funding or grant resources and tips. So I went through and I did just a brief search of the internet, and here you can see that there are so many grants available to us out there. It takes just a simple Google search. You can see my search term there, foundation grants, and it pulled up this many different grant opportunities from USAID, from Robert Wood Johnson, Bill and Melinda Gates, the International Foundation. Pharmaceutical companies have grants, Bloomberg Philanthropies. There are countless grants available to us. It's just for us to go and seek them out. So there are also databases that can help us bring those grant funding opportunities directly to us, to our inboxes, okay? There's a comprehensive database called Pivot RP, for which you can register easily. I did it, and I just got my first email blast of funding opportunities that are available to us. It also includes collaborators across all kinds of disciplines. So this is one of those ways that you can actually start to develop your relationships. You remember one of our R's from the 5 R's. So not only does it have funding opportunities, but you can also connect to other researchers. There's also something called Proposal Central, which allows researchers to get connected to funding opportunities, get credit for their contributions to the science, and then also realize, as they say, your full potential as a scientific investigator. So this is another place that you can register and get connected and get information about funding opportunities and collaborations, and then also show the world what it is that you have been contributing to your discipline. Finally, you have something that I just learned about, which is called Africa Research Connect. There are, you can get access to researchers across the continent. There are also data available to you through this website, and so many other things are listed in this website, such as different resources and tools that you can use to conduct research. I saw there the other day that there are a lot of AI tools available as well, and so as we are all working towards understanding AI and using AI, this might be an awesome opportunity for us to connect with our colleagues on the continent. As many of you may have heard in the introduction, I'm very passionate about lifting up our African brothers and sisters, because I believe that there's a great deal of knowledge encapsulated on the continent of Africa, and if I must say, especially in my beloved Nigeria. On my final slide, I just wanted to share a couple of things with you all. It's not impossible to do this, though it may sound that it is. There are many organizations out there that are and websites and groups out there to help us be successful in writing a grant and submitting a grant and hopefully getting the funds to do the proposed work. Sometimes it takes knowing what a good grant looks like. And so if you are trying to learn what a good grant looks like, the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, have actually posted exemplar grants that have been funded for you to take a look at. And so I've included a link here to that website where you can actually read somebody's grant that received funding, and you can get an idea of what it looks like for somebody to be successful. If you're submitting to the National Institutes of Health and many other organizations, a lot of times they actually have a description of how you're supposed to write their grant. It gives you step-by-step instructions. In fact, some of the questions that I asked related to each section of a grant actually came from the NIH. They're the ones who said exactly what it is you're supposed to put in your grant. There's a website called Instrumental, which actually you can register for and get grant funding opportunities directly to your email. You can watch videos if you're a visual learner or an auditory learner. You can watch videos about writing grants. And then, of course, you should be attending workshops. You've come here today. I cannot say too much about CITER. They have countless workshops available to you on their website and on their YouTube channel. You can go back through and watch what they have been presenting over the years. You can learn a lot. But I've also listed some websites here as well. So with that, I want to say a big thank you to you all for participating in the webinar with me. I know it may not be the usual thing to have your webinar host also asking you to participate, but I'm very grateful that you all have. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to put them in the chat now, but I've also listed my email in case I can be of assistance in the future. If I'm slow to answer, forgive me, I will respond. However, I've also listed my website as well. It's under construction, but it is available so that you can see the work that I have been doing in the past as well. So with that, I will turn it back over to the wonderful Professor Onyeka.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Stephanie. Thank you. Thank you. So you have questions, but I'm going to have to make an announcement that we are not sending slides to your email, but you can reach out to us. You can go to our YouTube channel. We have previous webinars, and this webinar is live. It's also on YouTube, and the link is on the chat. And if you want slides, we have a website. It's also on the chat, and you can go to our website, and this will Professor Ibemer's own presentation should be in the website in a week. So just check out our website, citer.org, www.citer.org. So let's jump right into the question now. So the question you have, first of all, you have a comment, okay? This is from Arthur Pizarro, and I suspect it's the professor of critical care. I'm not sure. Arthur, if you're the professor of anesthesia and critical care, just give us a thumbs up. So he's saying he doesn't have a question, but he's saying thank you for this initiative. And then Allison is asking a question. So Allison is saying, what are the possible hurdles that one can encounter as a first-time applicant who may not have previous publications?
That's a great question. If you don't have publications in the field that you're writing your grant in, you might find it difficult to get the award. And that's because you want to show to the reviewer that you actually have prowess, you have command of the discipline, that you have been contributing to the discipline. So they need to know that you understand your field, right? That you have been able to contribute to your field. And by doing so, you are outlining what the gap actually is, right? So it's really about what I would suggest, right? If you don't have publications and you're trying to write a grant about something for which you don't have publications, you can start by doing a literature review. You can start by doing a systematic review to show that you have actually done the work to identify what the issue is. The point of the publication is to show that I know how to do research, 1. 2, I know what the actual issues are. And so without publication, it's very difficult to make the case that you know what it is that you're trying to do. I hope that helps.
Exactly. The funders won't be satisfied if you don't have publication area. Okay, so this another question from Dr. Chima. She's saying, great presentation. Thank you so much. Please, could you throw more light on research timeline? Yeah, so research timeline is a tricky thing,
right? You can't always account for all the issues that may take place, right? I remember when I was doing my own study, one of my colleagues kept saying, you have to factor in the Nigeria factor, the Nigeria factor, the Nigeria factor. So sometimes when you're developing a research timeline, it can be difficult. But what a research timeline is essentially you demonstrating to the reviewer what parts of your aims are going to take place when. And so on the diagram that I put on my slide, what I did is I used the months that correspond to the number of years that the grant was allowed to run. So for example, if your grant is allowed to run for 2 years, you would have 24 months to complete all objectives in your grant proposal. So what you want to do is highlight on the sort of left side of your milestones chart, what are all the things that you have to do for this grant to be successful, if you can summarize them better. But the point is, you want to outline by aim and by strategy, if you will, what it is you have to get done and when you think it will get done. That's what the milestones chart is for.
Okay, so the next question is from Victoria in Chimbaria, and she's saying, how do we know that the sites for the grants are genuine? She's so scared of scammers, and there are so many of them on the internet.
Wow, what a good question. You know, this is where your colleagues and your collaborators can be very helpful. Usually, you want to be looking for things from .org or .gov type websites as a norm, okay? But then if you're working with collaborators, it may be wise to work with them to look at a grant announcement and ask yourselves, does this look legitimate? You can try reaching out to said grant funders, and if you don't get a reply, you might move on from that. But I think what you want to do is make sure you're looking at opportunities that are coming from .org or .gov. Sometimes those .com websites can be real. However, you want to ask around is what I would suggest. That's what I would do. And then if you have a good IT department, sometimes they can be helpful in identifying those things too, and helping you decide whether or not something is real or possibly a fake website. But that's a really good question for which, that's the best answer I have. Maybe others have thoughts on that, but that's what I would do.
Yes, you're right. And you talked about repositories like Proposal Central, say. So you can go to Proposal Central, register, and you can go through a lot of grants there safely. And of course, Proposal Central, some allow you to submit, make your application and submit to Proposal Center. So going through those repositories, Pivot, PR, yeah. So your next question is, this is from Nelson, and he's saying, can you kindly explain what is expected to be on a biosketch?
Yes, I can. So the biosketch, it's can sometimes be a difficult thing to pull together, right? And so the biosketch actually is meant to have about we call it 4 sections. So on the biosketch, the first part of the biosketch is really your opportunity to explain who you are and what you have been doing in terms of your education. But then the section A, which is called the personal statement, is an opportunity for you to write out what you have done as a scientific investigator and how your expertise will lend itself to you leading your project, okay? In that section, you will also want to highlight some projects that you have done that show that you have the knowledge necessary to do the work. So for example, if I am proposing a project which requires cultural and linguistic adaptation, luckily I have that expertise. And so in that personal statement section, I'm going to write about that expertise and highlight the grants for which I was funded to do that work, okay? The section B portion of the biosketch is where you list all your honors, basically, any positions you hold, scientific appointments you hold, and any awards you have received for what you have done, Okay. And then the section C is where you will include any of your publications that you have related to the project that you are proposing. So, like I said, if I want to do cultural and linguistic adaptation work and I'm leading a project for that, that section, section C, is going to be filled with all the publications I have in that particular area.
Okay, thank you. So this question is saying, does one have to, when you're talking about the 5 hours, does one have to go from 1 to 2 to 3, or I mean, is it a random thing?
Well, that's a good question. To be honest, nothing in grant writing is linear. So oftentimes though, you would have needed to do the research first, right? To understand what kind of funding opportunities are available to you before you can go and do all the other steps. So if there's anything that I will call linear, in that process, it's really the research part. You need to make sure that you know what funding is available to you first, which funding agencies are out there, and then you may need to do all the other ones at the same time. So that's what I would say.
Okay. Okay. So this question from Gloria says, you have to be in the academia or in a university before you apply for them.
No, no, not at all. Not at all. It does help if you're in those kind of structured institutions, right? Because they have grants offices and grant administrators and all those things that can help you. But even, community organizations apply for grants and things like that. So you don't have to be in institutions of higher learning to be able to get grants. In fact, some of the funding opportunities I saw as I was preparing for this presentation actually invite nonprofit organizations and things like that to apply for grants.
Yeah, so NGOs, yeah. So you can
Yes.
be in an NGO. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I think like I said, funders would like to see how responsible you are. So if you have an affiliation to an NGO, you'd also be able to get the grant to make a strong case with your science.
Yeah.
But if you are just an individual somewhere and you don't have an institutional backing or group backing, it might be pretty difficult. I think so, yeah. Okay. So your next question is from Oluwatosin. And Oluwatosin, she's saying, how many publications qualify you for a grant?
Oh gosh. That's a hard question to which I don't think I have an answer, right? There's, you would need to have publications in the area for which you're writing the grant, but I'm not sure that there's a specific number that somebody's looking for. You just need to demonstrate that you have the knowledge necessary to do the work. I think that's just the best answer I can give you.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, you can't tell how many, and the publications show that you've done work in the place that you suppose you want to do work.
Yeah.
So, you can say, make a table, and yet you can't show you've made a chair or something like there's evidence that you're a carpenter or you've done some carpentry before.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think same thing. So someone says, that's done, says, how can one find the right funding opportunity? I think we've hammered a lot on that.
We addressed that. Yes.
Okay. Then says this is Ade Bukola says, is it possible to use my PhD research proposal to apply for grant?
Well, yes, I think it depends though if you've already done the research or not. So there are often times when you are developing your PhD research proposal and you want to do it, but it requires money. Yes, of course, you can use it to submit for a research grant. The thing is you want to be careful because there are funding opportunities that are specific for your stage, right? And so you wouldn't want to go after the grant that's meant for a established investigator. You want to go for a grant that's specifically for dissertation research. They have grants like that.
Okay, so Najani Edward is saying, for grants that involve consortiums, what's the difference? What are the things to consider when you're applying as a consortium and when you're applying as an individual?
That's a great question. When you're applying as a consortium, it kind of is the same idea as applying as a multiple primary investigator grant. And so each one of you will need to demonstrate what your institutions are bringing to the table for the consortium to work. But then you also need to make it clear why it's necessary for that many institutions to be involved. What is it that's different at each one of those institutions that make the consortium important to be developed? There are other documents that will be necessary, right, for you to include if you're developing a consortium with multiple organizations. So it takes the same shape, it's just that more information will be required and justification required for why the consortium is necessary.
Okay. There's also another question that says, is it necessary to include your bio sketch when submitting the application for research grant, or does it depend on funding?
Yeah, you sort of answered your question, right? So it depends, right? You need to make sure again the first thing you do before, like when you wake up in the morning, you eat breakfast, right? You don't just go straight to working, although that's how we do in US. Sometimes you don't eat first. Don't do like us. Read the instructions first, right? Always start with the instructions. What does it say is required in the grant proposal? If it says you need a biosketch, then you put your biosketch, but it may not be that you need a biosketch in the name. It may be that in your grant proposal, you explain your expertise. That's why I said some of the concepts that come from these words that I'm using may be included in your grant proposal and not necessarily named as biosketch specific games or something like that, but the ideas, the concepts, the content may be required. Okay.
So how do you, Don is asking again, how do you overcome fear of rejection?
Oh, you get yourself really good mentors. That's how. You surround yourself with really good mentors who can lift you up when you're feeling down and also help you understand what it is about the work that you're doing that needs to change. Because sometimes when you're in that sort of depressed, fearful stage, you may not be able to see clearly. So having a good team around you, good mentors around you will help you a lot.
Okay, yeah, that's true. So Chisom is asking, does every grant proposal require specific state?
It's not every grant proposal, but the ideas of a specific games may be required. Yes. So again, I encourage each and every one of us to review what are the guidelines for each grant, and make sure that you follow it like an instruction book. Okay. Don't skip any one. Don't think one is better than the other. No, follow those instructions perfectly.
Okay, then John is asking again, how will you monitor the grant process after you made the application?
Oh, very good question. Each one of the grants funders may have a portal or something like that that you can follow your grant submission through. Some may not. Some may just ask you to submit and you won't be able to follow. But it depends on each one of the grant agencies to determine whether or not they have a way for you to monitor your progress.
Okay, so Isa Haruna is asking that you put up a copy of the bio sketch so that you can have one.
So should I share my slide again, or I could share like my own bio sketch. Would that be helpful right now?
Yeah, sure. Go
Okay.
ahead. Share your own bio sketch.
One moment. So I'm seeing mentor me. Well,
Okay, so the person saying mentor him or her should put their email. They should put their name. They shouldn't be anonymous.
yeah. Well, we'd have to talk about that,
Definitely
but So this is, I don't know if this is helpful to you all, but this is my bio sketch, my own personal bio sketch. And as you can see, as I mentioned, you have the top part where you add your education and who you are, but then the personal statement identifies my expertise, what it is I know how to do, and I've listed them here. The new thing that the NIH has allowed is that you can also highlight projects that you have been a part of to show your expertise, okay? And so I've listed them here, many of them for which I've been the primary investigator and some of which I've been a co-investigator. When you get down to here, you will see my positions and scientific appointments, but then also the honors that I have had that sort of show that other people believe that I am good at what I do, and not just me saying that I'm good at what I do. Then you can see my contributions to the science in part C, where I write about those areas of expertise that will help show that I have the knowledge and I have been contributing to the science in these different ways. I hope that's helpful to everybody. So that's my own personal bio sketch.
Question. Is bio sketch and capability statements the same thing? So I am thinking bio sketch and capability statement.
Can you repeat that question?
Is bio sketch and capability statement the same thing? So this is not on the Q&A, this is on the regular chat.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, yeah, well, the capability statements be like the personal statements on bio sketch.
I think that would be the personal statement of the bio sketch. Yeah. And the other thing is it depends on which capability you're talking about. Are you talking about institutional capability, or are you talking about your own personal capability or the team's capability? Depends which one we're talking about, but usually that would be the personal statement section, yeah, of the bio sketch.
Okay, so I see, okay, all right. So people saying they need mentorship. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly, while we wait for more questions to come in, I'm just going to briefly share with everyone here is that as the Center for Translation and Implementation Research, we have mentorship opportunity is usually advertised once a year. We've had it's called the CETA Scholar Program.
Right.
So it's a program for grant writing, program for developing your soft skills and your technical skills in grant writing. And so we've had it for 2 years running, going into the third year. Always look out for the advert. It's always on LinkedIn, it's always on WhatsApp, and people posting it around everywhere. Most of us are posting it around everywhere. We have a cohort already in session. So that is one place you can get members your mentorship. Then of course we have a Monday research in progress meetings every Monday. We have this opportunity of a webinar that Dr. Stephanie is here with us. We also have a research week, usually in June, 1 full week webinars in June every year. So those are the ways that we try to mentor people. Okay. So right now, I don't see any questions, any fresh questions on the Q&A. Yes. So, but I can see they're sharing email. Yeah. Okay.
I wish I could mentor all, but I don't know that that's physically possible. But you've shared the ways that I was going to suggest others to be mentored, and so please, everybody, avail yourselves to those opportunities because they are really quite amazing. We're seeing some great things coming out of the Scholars Program, so please be sure to check the CITER website to learn more and to stay engaged.
Yeah, to stay engaged. Okay. So I think in the absence of any more questions, Okay, yes, people are asking for the teacher website. So our IT, I think we put it on previously. So our IT will put or I can actually put the teacher website on. Yes. So you can go there and look around, and there are already some slides there. And when we are done, we will also put the second site up there. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Dr. Stephanie. We're excited to have you. Um, Everybody learned a lot. I learned a lot. Thank you so much. Please, we are going to be meeting here again next month, but it's going to be a different topic. So keep your eyes open for the e-flyers and keep your ears open for information. And thank you all for coming. We're giving you roughly over an hour back. So enjoy the rest of the day. And thank you so much, Dr. Stephanie. Thank you. Take
Thank you.
care, everyone. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. I'm good. Would you like me to stay on or should I?
Doshima says she's really proud to be a nurse. She learned a lot. Thank you, Doshima.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. I'm glad to see that.